Okay, the recording has begun, John.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another issue of Behind the Bench. It's been a while, and we're excited to have a new partner with the National Soccer Coach Association of Canada that's going to help us with our Behind the Bench webinars going forward. And our partners are Euro Football Exchange. And Adrian Field is going to host this episode, and he's also with Euro Football Exchange. And Adrian, maybe you can talk a bit about that before we bring in our guest.
Yeah, fantastic. And thanks for that, John. As mentioned, my name is Adrian with Euro Football Exchange. Happy to be hosting on behalf of NSCAC today. Welcome, everybody from all over the world. Euro Football Exchange takes teams, players overseas to Europe to train and play with pro academies. So if you haven't heard of us, I'm happy to share that with you, but not really here to talk about that today. Here to talk about our special guest, Mr. Steve Payne. Mr. Steve Payne, an established coach within the community, an award-winning journalist as well. Today, he's going to be here speaking with us about his modifications and his viewpoint on small-sided games and how they can be done better and more effectively. All right. So, Steve, if you're with us, I'm sure we will have the slides up for you shortly. Did you want to say a quick hello and maybe talk a little bit more about your journalist experience and how that's brought you here today?
Yeah, when I was 15, I was at Charlton Athletic. I signed their schoolboy forms, but after a couple of years, it became clear that I wasn't going to make the top grade. So I went into journalism, which was always my sort of second choice. So I became a journalist, spent years as a journalist in England, and then eventually met a young lady on holiday in Barbados. She was Canadian, so I moved to Canada. Was at the Toronto Sun for about 20 years. Traveled the world there as a journalist in various tasks: general reporter, feature reporter, travel writer, night editor, etc. And then spent 20 years as a journalist. Fun enough, was laid off from the Toronto Sun when they'd started to downsize. Went into government for a little while, and fun enough, got laid off from there, which it must have been telling me to take up soccer on a more full-time basis. So that's what I did essentially, and ever since then I've been involved pretty much in soccer coaching. I'm involved with about 3 or 4 different clubs at the moment. I also scout for the Ontario Soccer, and I'm returning. I was once a learning facilitator teaching coaches. I've actually gone back to that. I wasn't able to do that for many years because I was coaching. You can't coach and be a learning facilitator at the same time. So that's back where I am now, pretty much.
Yeah, brilliant. And you've reached the highest levels of the game. I mean, you have a UEFA Pro license. Very, very rare in our community. So we're very lucky to have you involved in the community and sharing your knowledge and insight you've developed over a number of years.
Yeah, that was a pretty long route as well. I decided to sort of pursue that here in Canada, and just gradually went through the various courses and UEFA, and then ended up going to Northern Ireland, which I really enjoyed. So I continued doing all the work with the Northern Irish Football Association and did my pro license with them. To be honest, I took a loan from the bank because I had to go to Belfast 14 times, plus go to England a couple of times, plus do a trip to Brazil as well. So I probably eventually paid for it about 10 years later. But I was sort of
well worth it in the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I had the UEFA A level, and then I got the chance to go on the pro license, and I thought. The way I thought of it was that, if you were a ballet dancer and you were suddenly asked to dance at the National Ballet, you either say yes or regret it later. So I said yes and just embarked on that long course through the pro license.
Yeah, no, it's that.
I have to keep up as well. So I keep it up with various professional development stuff, on an annual basis.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of interesting topic you really have for us today, and I guess it's backed by a lot of the research and experience that you have from the various countries: Brazil, Costa Rica, Australia, obviously your experience back here at home in Canada as well. Did you want to say any sort of overview remarks regarding the small-sided game, or shall we just get straight to the content?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say is that next year, funnily enough, will be my 50th year of coaching. Will be next year.
Wow.
And when I sit and think about it, it's still just a game. In year 1 it was a game, and in year 50 it was a game. But somewhere along the line, we've tried to take that game and dissect it into 1,000 different pieces, when essentially it's still a game. And that's where you learn. In my view, it's not shared by everybody. The game is still the best teacher. I mean, you can control the game to do the teaching, but it's still a game. Nobody's changed that. It doesn't matter how much analysis, how many computers you throw in it, how many sports sciences you throw at it. At the end of the day, it is a game.
Yeah, I can't argue with you there. And it's a game that we all know and love, right? And we fall in love with it at very young ages, and it sticks with us, all the way throughout, whether it's 1 year in the journey or 50 years like yourself, right? So
yeah. So that's why I really sort of trying to push the last couple of years the idea of coaching the game within the game. And I've even we did this presentation a year ago. Unfortunately, although that didn't work out recording wise,
right?
We're redoing it, which is actually quite good, because even since then, I've taken it into an even further route that maybe we can talk about at the end. I've taken it another direction, still within the game now, but I'm even thinking about it in a different facet. Yeah,
perfect. Well, John, do we have the material ready?
Yeah. So, do I share my screen to do that? Is that
if you could do, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yeah, it's coming through now, John.
Okay. All right. There we are. That's our first slide.
Fantastic. Oh, over to you, Steve.
Yeah, if you just want me to commentate on, that's a Newmarket United Soccer Club here in Ontario that I took to experiment a little with on this facet. This are under 13 girls, so you're looking at 12 and 13-year-old girls. So you can move forward a slide, but that's who I use for this experiment. And as we said, some of this is quite clear on the slide. I'm finding now, and I've been through lots of generations of kids and done my own generation with coaching. I mean, when I was playing, I was subjected to every kind of coaching you can think of, from my way or the highway, to a much more gentle approach. These days, the kids, just in my view, their attention span is so poor that unless you almost challenge them immediately in a session, you've lost them. And I think that's why I'm not a big fan of isolated practice. I think the isolated practice should be done by the kids themselves. They can just kick a ball against a wall and do their own practice. So I don't want to go into isolated practice when I get them out there. I want them to have realistic gameplay. And without the challenge, I don't think you switch the brain on. The Brazilians are very good at this idea of switching on the brain. They have, for example, their first rule of defending, for example, is interception. And I've asked the Brazilian coaches why that is. And they say, well, as soon as we say kids have got to intercept, their brain is switched on. They're actually looking at the game and thinking about the game rather than just playing. So I'm trying to use that approach where you get a small-sided game and you put some kind of restraint or condition in there that will switch on the kids' brains. Now, this particular experiment was based on passing and receiving. So every session, we looked at passing and receiving, which of course is 90% of the game. And that's what we did. And I went through a series of weeks with that focus in mind. If you want to move on a slide. So people think, small-sided games is just, a 10-a-side, 9-a-side. A small-sided game is 1v1 or 4v1 or 3v1. But each of those games, whichever way you put it, has some kind of challenge. There is an opponent. So you have to think rather than just run from cone to cone. I remember a Dutch coach who really influenced me by the name of Han Berger. He once watched a coach lay out all these cones and they're doing a lovely passing pattern. When everybody came back together, his first question to the coach was, well, what happens when the cones move? And I've never forgot that statement from him. I've always thought about that ever since. And what he's saying is that unless there's some kind of movement or opponent, we're just going to become a robot without any thinking. So my idea is to set up games, let them explore, let them make mistakes, let them think for themselves, and then adjust and self-correct themselves. So more action, less instruction. And I very clear here where I say, do not underestimate the capacity of young players to find solutions. They will find them. If you give them a challenge and say, this is what you need to do, they will come up with the answer. You may have to guide them, and I prefer the word guide to coach, but they'll find the answer. So less time instructing, more time for the kids to figure things out, even in a 4v1. And I'll give you an example. A 4v1, most coaches will put down 4 cones, and the 4 kids will stand right in the corner, which is the worst place to be. So sometimes I would just say to a kid, why is the corner the worst place to be? And eventually they figure out that they're stuck there. So if the ball is played into a corner, they are stuck. And if they are then pressed by the opponent, there's no way out. So what's the solution? Halfway along each side, as soon as they go halfway along each side, their whole field is opened up, and the 4v1 becomes a much more realistic. I just did that again the other night with some kids, and they figured that one out quite quickly. So you want to move on there, John? Just go ahead one slide. That's a picture of me and my old schoolmates back in the day. We used to play on the field, street soccer. They were best days of my life in many ways.
Right?
Yeah, which is still a very, very crucial. You want to move on a slide, John? If we can. That's the team that I used. Just an ordinary recreational football team. I mean, they play rep soccer, so we're not talking about elite players here. We're talking about the kids that most of us work with. I didn't treat them as professionals because they're not professionals, but we tried to help them progress within the limits of their capabilities. I mean, we can explore their capabilities. None of these girls are going to play for Canada. Most of the kids we work with are never going to play for Canada, 99.9%. So let's not treat them as though they're going to play for Canada. Get them into a fun-filled environment where they can love the game and improve because they love the game. Not improve because you're yelling at them and telling them what to do. They're going to love the game. That way they'll improve much easier than they will if we just yell at them all the time. So that's the team I use. So again, John, you can move on. So there you go. I called this the way forward, and as I say, it was all based on passing and receiving, which is most of the game. So how do we improve passing and receiving realistically? Well, I went on this 8-week project. Each session was 90 minutes. Every session was devoted to passing and receiving in one way or another. And the games had targets, constraints, and/or conditions. Again, you can move on, John, because that's pretty much an overview of what we did. Now, there you go. Less coaching, more encouragement. It's an interesting experiment to the coaches listening. Could you actually run a session without saying a single word once you've set a game up? It's an interesting experiment. Or can you run a session for 90 minutes with virtually saying, just a few words here and there of guidance? But here's the thing. So the opposition is ever present. I'm a great believer in that. You're giving them challenges to solve, absolutely crucial. Give them the occasional guidance. Could we do it this way? What do you think might be a better way? And get the kids to answer that in that way. But the one thing I threw in, which really was probably the biggest experiment of all, was asking them to play fast, which really throws them a challenge. And we called it Formula One football. Now, the interesting thing is you would think, okay, you're going to make them play really fast. They're going to make huge numbers of mistakes. Actually, it's the opposite. And I found that really surprising myself, because you're suddenly asking them to play fast. Their brain is really switched on, and they have to solve that problem. And it's quite remarkable how these recreational kids improved the speed of their play. And you'll see that from a sort of particular the game that we used to play. So again, you can move on, John. So we use this 100-point game, which is not my invention. Those of you who have ever heard of Michael Beale, who's quite a renowned coach, been at Liverpool and Aston Villa and Rangers. Anyway, we had each team defending 2 small goals. A successful pass means 1 point. If you score a goal, 10 points. And we had a coach for each team counting those points. So week 1, it took 24 minutes for one team to reach 100 points. By week 6, that 100 points was being achieved below 10 minutes. And in fact, I remember in one game when one team got it in under 5 minutes. So having been pressed to play fast, you can see the improvement that they were making there quite dramatically. Because 24 minutes down to 4 minutes to get those 100 points, either scoring or passing, is really quite good. So I sometimes imagine what you might be able to do that with a really, really elite team. How quick would they get to 100 points? And again, I know Michael Beale has used these practices at quite high levels. So here's a high-level practice that actually can be adopted for kids. And other teams within the club have now used this game quite regularly. And it's actually quite a good measure of the improvement in the passing and receiving, plus playing it quickly. Again, you can move on there, John. So here's some interesting stuff. First of all, the players and the coaches loved doing the sessions this way. It's easy to set up. The players are guided; they're not micromanaged, and micromanaged is an epidemic in coaching. I see it constantly, during games and at practices. Coaches who simply cannot stay quiet. And I'll get to. I mean, when I say can't stay quiet, they can't stay away from giving instruction. I'm quite a vocal coach when I'm coaching, but I'm usually in there encouraging them, saying, "Come on, can we do this quicker?" Etc. Really encouraging coach, which is completely different from standing on there do this. You can't do that. What a mistake you've made there. You got to do better. That's a different kind of encouragement. So anyway, doing this, the practices we found this way, less stress for coaches, certainly less stress for the players. And I'll go back to that demand for fast play, which upped the intensity. It forced better decisions. And in fact, overall, the play improved with fewer errors. Now, I'm going to go back to the intensity one. As I say, the coaches listening, what I find when I'm pretty much 95% to close to 100% of the sessions I've watched, the kids are training at nowhere near the intensity they could be. They're probably around 50, 55, 60% pretty much all the time. So if you demand that they play faster, the intensity goes up, and the play becomes better. You improve a team automatically if you can raise their intensity. Because you've switched, I'll go back to, again, the brain has been switched on. So I would, I'd urge you when you're doing your sessions, just try making your players play fast and see what happens. You'll be surprised. And it really, I find that it really works. So is there another slide, John, or are we close to the end there? Again, I don't do anything complicated. I hate complicated presentations, to be perfectly frank. So is there another slide there? Okay, so now you can use these games to do pretty much whatever topic you want. You pick the topic, play the games, and use the games to emphasize the topic. Again, defending and attacking 1v1, running with the ball, striking the ball, first touch, and scoring, which I know is a big interest of John's. The amount of goals that people are scoring and how can we improve people scoring. And there's a little game I use that you'll see in the next slide. But before we do that, just bear this in mind, because I watch the statistics in the Premier Division every week with a lot of interest. Passing levels are now probably, most teams are now 85-90% passing success rate. But their success rate in finishing is barely 40% in most games. So a team will have 12 shots, maybe score 2 goals. But of those 12 shots, you'll probably find 75% of the shots are not even on target. So we've got this obsession with teaching players to pass. And actually, we might be better off looking, and I'm sure John was smart, we might have better off doing a little bit more work on score, because the finishing rates, even at the Premier Division level, are poor. When you're only, hitting the target 20 to 30% of the time, I would have thought somebody would be doing a lot more work trying to get rid of that percentage. And because if you get a team out there that has 12 shots and scores 80% of them, they're going to win every game. They are going to win every single game. And here's a game I use, the next slide. Again, just set up a fairly small area, roughly the size of the penalty box. 2 teams. You can play 6v6 if you want, because if you look at most penalty areas, that's how many players will be inside it. But, when the team is trying to score, if the ball goes out, you can use a kick in, which means you can score direct, same as taking a direct free kick. And I just tell the kids, see the ball, see the goal, shoot. If not, set up a teammate. And then I also emphasize that they defend like hell, and to force errors. So we try to get the whole intensity of this game up. Play 20 minutes non-stop. So you get the tired last-minute legs. I mean, how many times do we have a chance in the last 30 seconds and it gets muffed by somebody, they hit it over the bar or whatever. So the last-minute legs is important. And again, those guiding words, score or the goalie saves it. That emphasizes hitting the target. If you hit the target, you're either going to score or the goalie saves it. One or the other. There are no exceptions to that, unless you want to miss. But they say nothing about misses and just get on with the game. And it's incredible. And I'd like to experiment a bit more with this game, perhaps with the same team on a regular basis. I'd like to see this game being done 2 or 3 times a week. And first team to 10, because it takes a lot longer to reach 10 goals than you think, even in that game, which emphasizes what's happening in the penalty area at the highest levels of soccer. People are in the penalty area, they're having shots, but they're not scoring. So surely to God, we would sit down and figure out, okay, let's improve that ratio. Because as I've said before, if you can get any team close to hitting the target 75% of the time inside the penalty area, they're going to score, and they're going to be a winning team. The other thing I talk to the kids about, which is not on the slide, is I use another thing that I learned from Brazil. Inside the penalty area is finishing. Outside the penalty area is shooting. And they emphasize a lot more use of the side of the foot inside the penalty area. In other words, just to pass the ball into the net. So that's a game, and I know John's very interested in this topic with his book. And I see quite a few things now creeping onto LinkedIn about finishing. I know Pep Guardiola's got a big thing that he's trying to move into, try and improve that finishing rate inside the final third. So maybe there's going to be more emphasis on scoring than there is on passing, because all the passing in the world is not going to be any good unless you score at the other end. Anyway, so I think that's the last slide on there. Is it, John? It may be the last one. So there you go. We'll get back to it. We've got to be real as youth coaches. We can't treat players like professionals. We have to nurture the game within them. So I think having small-sided games is a much better option than having isolated practice and complicated sessions. The practices need to be realistic. needs to be competitive. Kids want a challenge. They want something to do. They don't just want to stand around. And I think the coach has to have this enthusiastic involvement. Get in there with the kids and, just gel them up, get them going. Because the game belongs to the kids. It doesn't belong to the coach. It doesn't belong to the parents. You can't, and I'm going to go back to that point. We can't manufacture players. I think we're at the point now where we're using all this analysis. We're literally trying to manufacture players. I don't think that works personally. I think you have to nurture them. If you take a group of 20 kids and you work with them long enough, as we used to say in the old days, the cream will eventually reach the top. Some kids simply are more talented than others. We're never going to get around that. That's a fact of life. Some people are better at mathematics than others. I mean, I'm useless at mathematics, but I was pretty good as a writer. So we can't turn every kid into a professional player. So get them out on the field, get them playing, use games, manufacture the games. I'll use that word. I'd rather, constrain the games so that you want to do certain things. You want to do wit or whatever. You can put conditions in that will help whatever topic you want to pick on. And at the end of the day, as I said, after 50 years, I'm still going to say the same thing. It's still a game. If you put a bunch of kids on a field and you let them play, they are going to get better. They are going to get better. Some will get better than others. No computer's going to change that. I've never yet seen a player produced on a piece of paper. And the day that happens, the game's gone, frankly. But I've noticed on LinkedIn, which I'm quite active on, that there is a much bigger move towards gameplay and kids being allowed to play like they used to do on the streets. Some clubs have actually got street program activities. This is at the professional level. They've actually got evenings where they do street soccer or street style soccer. There's a team in Brazil, like it's Palmeiras, where they've got one field, only the kids are allowed on. The kids go in it, there's no adults allowed on that field. So the kids go and play there themselves. And that's Palmeiras. And I'm pretty sure that Palmeiras at the moment is producing more players out of Brazil than any other club. And if they've got a field there where there's kids only, no adults, somebody there must have been taking a long, hard look at how they're producing the players as well. So I think that's the last slide. Is it, John, on that? But
yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I was going to mention I have taken this a little bit further now. I'm trying to get my sessions down to 3 words, literally. So I have one session now that's called switch, forward, fast. Play for an hour. It doesn't matter what the level of player. Play for an hour. First 20 minutes emphasizes switching the play constantly. Change direction. As soon as you get the ball, change direction. Second 20 minutes, I now say, why have you changed direction? And they'll invariably say, well, we tried to change direction so we can create space to go forward. So the second 20 minutes emphasizes, can we now switch and go forward? And again, back to that fast. The last 20 minutes, play as fast as possible. It's a really good session, very, very intensive. And an hour is enough because the players are quite tired afterwards.
Powerful words as well, right?
Yeah.
Switch forward fast. I think everybody, regardless of your level, can sort of envision what that looks like, right?
Yeah. And I've done that, as I say, I've done that with recreational players, and I've done it with the top men's team at Newmarket, and all of them like that session. And another one, I'll just give you another example, and then maybe you can open it up. People can have discussion. I call, hang on a second, I'll remember it, but it's 3 words again. It's anticipate, intercept, attack. Again, 1 hour, first 20 minutes, I ask the players to try and watch the game. Can you anticipate what the other team or the other player is going to do next? So again, trying to switch on the brain. What are they going to do next? Watch the game. Don't just play, watch the game. Second 20 minutes, I'm saying, now that you've worked on this anticipation of what might happen next, Can you intercept? Can you steal the ball? So that 20 minutes of play. And then the third session, again, the third part, again, trying to play fast. If you intercept, how fast can you attack? So now we've got anticipate, intercept, attack. So that's one other a session I use with 3 words.
Sounds like you were inspired from your interception in Brazil.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, if you can intercept a ball, you've obviously put players out of the game. So now you can go forward. So just trying to think about it, but it's easy for kids and men and ladies to switch on to those 3 words. Okay, this is what the session's about. Not give them, today we are going to coach so and so to overlap and so and so. I've tried to break all that down completely.
You've boiled it right down to the simple actions.
Simple actions, yeah.
That's very, very clever. I've certainly taken quite a bit away from your presentation. More than 1 or 2 nuggets in there. A few questions from my side, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we think about small-sided games and it's being used all over the globe, but what do you think are the pitfalls? Maybe you talk about it. I mean, what do you think are the core flaw? Because not all small-sided games are created equal. Is it really overcoaching? Is it the people are tinkering too much, too many conditions, too many constraints? Like, should we really take that lead and boil it down to the more simple facets? Or what do you think are the pitfalls? Because sometimes I think all coaches will say, "Oh, it's just not effective." So I'd rather do isolated activities where I can tell them exactly where to go, what to do, when to use the skills, etc. It leaves too much to chance. Like, what do you say to those coaches?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think that. It may work with some kids, but most kids these days, for example, first of all, you've got to decide, are you dealing with a professional team or are you dealing with a bunch of children,
right?
Or young players? How good are these young players? Are they going to play for Canada? Are they going to play for Spurs? Are they going to play for West Ham? Are they going to play for Toronto? If you look at that group, you think to yourself, well, probably not, maybe one. So now we've already toned it down. And what do you or me want to do when we go to a soccer practice?
Play football, play soccer.
We want to play football. So if you're setting up some kind of session that doesn't look like football, get rid of it.
Yeah.
For me, it's much easier to take it down to a game level. Which again, if you want to practice individual technique, you can do that in a 4v1.
Right.
But you've still got one player there that's making the kids think rather than just pass from cone to cone. You can show them the technical aspects within a 4v1.
So building on that concept, what are your thoughts on overloads, underloads? Is it always equal numbers? What about neutral players? Because I know that's quite a common theme in small-sided games.
Yeah, I think you can get away with neutral players at the high levels because it works there. The players will use the neutral player. But I think when you put the kids and you put one kid in another coloured vest, chances are nobody will ever pass to them. That's my observation when I see it. They just don't use the neutral player. If you're dealing with Spurs, and you put Basuma as the neutral player, the other teams will use him. But the kids don't do it. So I'm not a huge fan of neutral players. I have no problem at some levels of even kids playing 6 against 7, because half the time they don't even know they're playing against 7. If you don't tell them, they don't even know. And again, if you've got 6, maybe you've got 6 players that have got 2 or 3 that are better than some of the ones in the 7. So I don't see any problem with that. I don't see any problem with 7 against 8. Sometimes I say to the kids, okay, you're a man down. You've just had somebody sent off. You've had a red card. You've now got to deal with it. So I don't really have a problem with that.
Yeah, and so when you think about just moving further along this thread about the role of the coach in the small-sided game, and I know you spoke a little bit about less is more and speaking less and deriving more impact. Some coaches might feel, outwardly that if I'm not speaking, I'm not coaching, right? I'm not instructing. So what advice would you give to coaches in terms of what their role is at the youth, at the grassroots level in the small-sided game?
Well, the first question is don't allow themselves to be pressured by parents. Forget that aspect that you're the coach. they're the parent, they're the one dropping off the kid to play. I mean, frankly, I would prefer that parents drop their kids off and went to Tim Hortons for an hour.
Paul Mary style.
Yeah.
No adults allowed.
That takes away the pressure. Kids play differently when their parents are not there. They practice differently when their parents are not there. Perfect example is if you can get inside a gym, you know, the door is shut, the parents are not inside the gym. I've noticed a million times the difference between kids playing in front of parents, kids playing not in front of parents. And I think we can all probably imagine that scenario. So for the coach, he's the one in charge. But speaking all the time is not really helping the kids, and it's probably putting more stress and strain on the coach. So I think the small-sided games, we'll use width in attack as the perfect example. Set up a game with 2 goals at each end, you know, as wide apart. Kids soon realise that if they can't reach one goal, they're going to switch the play and go to the other. So you've actually got the width, you know, the width topic going on within the constraints of the game.
Without saying a word.
Yeah, and you don't have to keep explaining it. You can do it a couple of times, you know, just guide them a little bit. But another way to look at it is if you're sat at work and you're trying to do a job and somebody comes and stops you every 30 seconds and says, no, you're not doing it right. How long are you going to be there in that job, and how long is it you're going to turn around and speak to the person who keeps telling you to? Kids don't want to be yelled at all the time, but it doesn't work anymore. I mean, I was at one time when I was a kid, and some coaches just screamed at you constantly. It was almost allowed back then, you know, but it doesn't work. I think it's better to set up a challenge and then let the kids figure most of it out. You can guide them a little bit, but if they figure it out, they'll go home happier thinking, oh, I solved that problem. Right. I got that right. I did that.
Bit of confidence boost.
Not the coach told me to do this.
Right. Just building on that with challenges. I mean, you spoke about the 100-point game. I know personally in environments, I mean, I've used a variation of that, but never with goals. So I was curious, in your experience, having worked at it with the various different levels, how did teams generally achieve the 100? Was it more through passing or more through the 10-point reward for striking a goal?
Interestingly, it varied. I think the team that got that under 4 minutes, I think it was 4 minutes and 45 seconds, if I remember correctly, I think they scored 4 goals, which is 40 points, and they got the other 60 from passing. So it varied. Obviously, the kids soon realised if you can score a goal, is that the points are going to mount up pretty quickly.
Right.
You can't score a goal all the time. So rather than just, the kids figured out that if they just went for goal every time, they'd lose the ball more often. So they began to keep possession a little bit more and then go.
The risk reward and the decision-making process plays in.
They figured out how to do it. And sometimes they figured out that if 2 players could do 3 quick passes, again, see, the kids were solving the problem. I think, I mean, I would, you know, tell Mark, I know Michael a little bit. If I ever see him again, I will tell him that 100-point game that he came up with is a gem, an absolute gem. And it works at higher levels as well as lower levels.
Yes.
It's a really good game. And you can swap it around and probably give it a different condition. You could have, say, if a kid can reach a certain line and get his foot on the ball, maybe you get 5 points for that, or different ways of doing it. But one of the keys was trying to get them to do it as fast as possible.
Right. John, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. You might want to just, if anyone else has a question,
absolutely.
I guess they can just press the raise your hand button.
Raise their hand, or they can drop it in the meeting chat or a Q&A.
Yeah, I'm about as transparent as you can get, so you can ask me anything.
Yeah, so I just thought I'd mention that. But and I assume in your game there, Steve, the 100-point game with the 2 goals, the size of the field depends on the quality of the players.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't using full-size goals. They're like 2 portable goals. You can use whatever size pug net you want. If you make the goal smaller, that's obviously more difficult. I wouldn't use 4 full-size goals, for example, because then it's probably going to be unrealistic.
But the size of the field itself would change.
It would depend on the amount of players, but I mean, if it's 8v8, I'll use half a field.
All right, perfect. I've just John dropped a message in the Q&A if anyone has questions, or they can feel free to raise their hand. Just a question, Steve, on the matches. So when you play with goals and you play with goalkeepers, in your environment, and I've been in many a grassroots environment where you don't have designated goalkeepers. Do you simply ask players to fill that role, or do you prefer to use a small sort of pug or target nets?
No, I mean, if we've got goalkeepers, we'll use goalkeepers at times. I mean, young kids should be swapping positions anyway. So anybody out there who says that, the 9-year-old is the permanent goalkeeper has probably got it wrong, because the kids should be swapping their roles and playing in different positions. That was one of the beauties of street football. Nobody really had a set position; you just got on with it.
And they always seem to find a goalkeeper, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, and I've used games where we used to call it in England. We used to call it rush goalie. If you happen to be the nearest player to the goal, you're the one who could save it. So they'd have all sorts of different goalkeepers. Kids love that sort of thing as well. And I don't like the idea. I mean, you sometimes you'll take another player, a coach's session, and you'll see the kids line up as though they were playing in the game, and the kids playing at right back or left back, and they never move. I think that's their position for life. I think that's a huge error. So I tend to say, no. Look, this game's not positional this evening. This is a game. You're all going to try and do everything. Try to get everybody involved. Again, trying to teach them, not treat them like the Brazilian right back. They're just kids playing a game. Yeah. I think we have to remember that. I mean, if you're dealing with a high-level elite team, you may get more tactical and all the rest of it. I mean, when I hear a 10-year-old, coach of an 11 young team saying, "Oh, we're going to play 1-4-3-3 today," but next week we might play a diamond midfield. And most of the time, it's just because they've got it off the TV. They're not really knowledgeable about what that means, because we're talking about high-level football. I mean, how many times now do you watch a kid's game and the kid taking the corner will put his hand up as though they've got some special routine, and not a single kid in the middle will head it? So what a complete waste of time. But again, with this danger of pulling things off the TV and watching a Barcelona rondo and then wondering why your kids can't do the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, speaking on this, I mean, you've traveled all over and seen the passion for the game at all levels. Are you seeing this trend in everywhere you've been? Is it about small-sided, about the game as a teacher? Like, are you seeing, or is there sort of differing views on it in the different places that you've been?
I think there's different views on it in different places, but I think certainly if you were traveling across Africa, you would see much more games than you would see if you were traveling across, dare I say, some of the fields of Canada. We'd be much more, lined up and much more analytical, whereas the African kids are just kicking the ball around on a dust bowl, and I can tell you which ones are the better players, and it's not the ones on the fields in Canada, because we're nowhere near as gifted as some of those kids. But I think we can get them as gifted if we just put them in the right environment. And I think it's interesting that Jesse Marsh has taken over the Canadian national team, and I've been to one of his training camps, and he's really got that team on a roll. But one of the things he's got in front of him, and I'm sure Jesse would say, he's got a number of quite gifted individual players, but he's allowing them to play. And I watched the section. He wants those players in the final third, for example, to really be themselves. And I think when you watched the game against Wales, some of the combination play,
unbelievable,
those young forwards was absolutely brilliant, because he's given them some freedom. And then you see, the interesting stat, apparently, that very, very few of them went through the Toronto FC Academy.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting topic right there. And I don't think that's the fault of the Toronto Academy or anybody else, to be honest. But I think some of those kids just played a lot more free football than some of the ones that maybe in an academy setting from the age 10, where it got a bit more structured.
Yeah, I mean, there's a commentary about rigidity and formulaic approaches versus sort of free-flowing and creativity, right? And finding, I think, if you or I or anybody else could find the perfect blend of that, then we'd be a lot further ahead, right?
That's what I'm like. Yes, again, and I've seen that with the Canadian national team players. There's some gifted players in that group. Again, Jesse Marsh uses a phrase all through his sessions: every moment matters.
Every single one.
And it does. It's a cool statement. And I loved the way those Canadian kids were playing in training. It was, and quite intensive as well. He doesn't slow things down. They go right at it. And I think that team on its day is going to cause some upsets.
All right. So just checking the time as we move towards sort of the end of the webinar today. I mean, if you could offer a single best piece of advice to the coaches on the call and everyone who's going to be watching the recording afterwards, as they head into their next block of training sessions, they head off the training tonight into the winter periods. What would you say?
I'll give you the 3 words in a minute, but I would just encourage them to really enjoy themselves. Get the kids to enjoy themselves so that they're really loving the game, because that's what's going to bring them back. That's going to improve them. They might go home and hit a ball against a wall, which is the best training tool of all. But the 3 words I would use: let them play.
Let them play. Let them play. Oh, thanks very much for that, Steve. I think really, really powerful words. You've been very careful with the words you've selected today, but very, very powerful and memorable. Absolutely. So just want to remind everybody that this was brought to you on behalf of NSCAC, okay, another edition of Behind the Bench webinar. If you're not already a member with us, please do sign up. Tons of exclusive access, tons of benefits, including new partnerships all the time that can be gained by being a member. So do follow the links in the email that you'll get following this to join us. Mr. John.
And let me just add, you can feel free to give anybody my email. I have no problem receiving an email from anybody.
Fantastic. We certainly will do that. John, did you have any closing remarks that you wanted to chip in for today?
Like myself, yeah. Steve, thanks very much. Our goal is to help educate, additional education for all coaches, but also to promote coaches, Canadian coaches in particular, around the world, because I think we have some really great coaches here, such as we just experienced with Steve. And Steve, I really thank you for your time. That was a great session.
Anytime, John, and I appreciate your help there at the beginning. Getting my slides up. That's very much appreciated. I'm better on the soccer field than I am with a computer.
Yeah, same here.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you.